Greetings from Redefined Church. I'm Joel Van Briggle, and I'm delighted you've chosen to be with us today. Redefined Church is a gathering of people from various backgrounds and numerous nations who are exploring faith at the intersection of life, community, and mission. We hope that you sense that you belong, and you are always welcome at our in-person gatherings in Overijse and in Tervuren on Sundays. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook to see more things that are happening throughout the week. I hope that today you will sense God's love and experience His grace in your life. And now, our message. Daniel, Living in Exile. That is the new series for this month, and we're going to be looking at the book of Daniel. And the book of Daniel is found in the Old Testament, and it's considered one of the four major prophets. There's a series of minor prophets, but there are four major prophets: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. And they're not major because of importance necessarily, but in sheer volume. That's why they're called major prophets. And so, as we look at the book of Daniel, it tells us and teaches us about the Israelites who are in exile. That is, they were conquered and they were removed from Jerusalem, and there were captives, Israeli captives, who were held in Babylon. So we pick up in Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. I want to give us a little bit of context so that we can kind of get a picture of what's happening. So in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into the hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God, and these were carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. Now we're talking about King Nebuchadnezzar's God. So then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of the court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude of every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. So these captives are going to get a world-class education in the new Babylonian culture. And so this is kind of the backdrop of this series. It's people who are taken out of their comfort zone, out of their space where they were serving the one true God, and now in a place that doesn't believe and doesn't act and doesn't live the same way that they had always lived. And after living in centuries for a culture that had cultural institutions, education, and even government that supported their belief in the God of the Bible, they're now in Babylon, which is a city that's about 80 kilometers south of Baghdad, Iraq, in current geography. So Babylon religiously had many gods and many competing moralities. There was no singular belief or practices in this unified region. So this naturally created a tension between the Israelites who believed in the one true God of the scriptures and their new culture. So for us, in a similar way, how do we live as believers in a society where God is no longer at the center? And there are many competing gods that we deal with in our world today. Now, they don't seem to be in the same way, in the same format that happened during the Babylonian days of different images and sculptures and things like that, but our gods are more unique. Things like education, money, influencers, political ideologies, cultural identities, and even other religious worldviews. So I also see that one of the gods of our day is self. I'm going to do and believe what's good for me. That individualism of the West permeates lots of our world. So, as followers of Jesus, we may be accused of being intolerant or maybe accused by those who don't believe like us, or maybe have hard questions about God allowing unjust suffering in our world. How do we handle that? How do we live in a place that doesn't foster our relationship with God and doesn't encourage our walk of faith? So today's passage from the book of Daniel helps us navigate some of these issues. And first of all, let's take a look at the golden image that we're about to see, which addresses the problem of tolerance. And then we're going to look at different problems throughout the book of Daniel. And Daniel chapter 2, starting in verse number 24, says this. Then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and say to him, do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him. And Arioch took Daniel to the king at once, and said, I have found a man among the exiles of Judah who can tell the king what his dream means. The king asked Daniel, also called Belshazzar, are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? Now, this is a pretty big deal. If you don't stop and read it for a moment, it's one thing for the king has had these very troubling dreams, and he's looking for people to tell him what it means. Tell them about it and tell them what it means. And none of the wise men were able to do this. And so the king is ready to execute all of the wise men in the kingdom. And of course, Daniel pops into the scene here and says, don't kill them. Let me tell you what your dream is. Now, of course, it's one thing to hear a dream from someone. Has anybody ever told you a dream and then you can make up an interpretation? Well, here in this story, the king doesn't even tell the people, doesn't tell Daniel what the dream is, but he expects them to say, you tell me what I saw and then interpret it for me. This, my friends, would really take it up a notch and be a very nerve-wracking thing, and dependence upon God in this circumstance, absolutely imperative. So the king's asked, can you tell me what I saw, and then can you interpret it? Now, I want to take a little pause here because Daniel's Hebrew name means God is my judge. And we see that he has two names here, which was not uncommon, but his Babylonian name was Belshazzar, which means Bel, protect our king, or protect the king. It's the god of that region, the pagan god. So Daniel's name has been changed to Belshazzar, which is honoring and asking and invoking favor and protection of this God that is not the God of Daniel. So the Hebrew captives were given a new identity and a new name in Babylon. And this duly represented a challenge for the Hebrew captives and for us today as Christ followers. How do we as believers navigate life in a secular culture while maintaining our identity in God? Now, it's free for us to have our name. It's free for us to even be called Christian or to be called a Christ follower. But this was a circumstance where their identity was taken, where they had been defeated and they were humiliated and their identity was taken from them and a new identity was applied. Now, in verse number 27, Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that passed through your mind as you were lying in your bed are these. Now I'm going to pause here for a moment, because in this story you realize God is revealing this mystery to Daniel to be able to communicate this to the king. So notice Daniel's humility, and he deflects the glory. He says, it's the God of all gods that it's my God, Daniel's saying. It's my God who reveals these mysteries. It's the God of heaven who reveals these mysteries. And so he's dependent upon God. And these should characterize our lives. That we are humble and we're reflecting God's glory, that other people are seeing him in us. Pick up in verse number 29. As your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to the things to come, and to the revealer of mysteries showed that what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than anyone else alive, but so that your majesty may know the interpretation and that you may understand what went through your mind. Again, tremendous humility on the part of Daniel here. And I love how he reflects his dependence upon his God. So verse number 31, your majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold. Its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands, and it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron and the clay and the bronze, the silver and the gold were all broken into pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. What in the world did we just read? That's a pretty crazy dream. And one might think that Nebuchadnezzar had some crazy pizza that night before. But the truth is, this revelation in this dream happens, and God reveals it. And so the explanation comes a few verses down in Daniel chapter 2, verses 44 through 46. And Daniel explains the meaning of the dream. Verse 44, in the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and will bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of the mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, bronze, the clay, the silver, the gold into pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true and its interpretation is trustworthy. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. There must have been an overwhelming relief when the king himself responds in such a way. But the meaning of this dream, the dream symbolizes the kingdoms of the world and their eventual downfall. The statue represents human kingdoms, with feet of clay indicating their fragility. The rock that destroys the statue symbolizes God's eternal kingdom through Jesus, which will ultimately prevail. And this serves as a reminder that building one's life on anything other than God's kingdom leads to anxiety and insecurity. In fact, this world, all of the kingdoms that seem so strong and impenetrable, it is going to come to ruin. Now, we don't know all of the times for all things. We do know that it wasn't too long before the Babylonian kingdom fell, before things got shaken up. But there is both a present moment for Daniel, reality that was about to come, but also a future, an ultimate future where God establishes his kingdom. So the imagery of the stone or the rock repeats over and over and over again through the Bible. And there was a moment when the Israelites, if you remember, they were in the desert wandering and thirsty with Moses. And Moses strikes a rock with his staff, and salvation occurs in the form of water coming from that rock. They were in desperate place, and God provided the water. In the Psalms, written long before Daniel was written, said, "You, O Lord, are the rock of my salvation." You see, this theme and these ideas are not new ideas. It didn't happen with Nebuchadnezzar first. In fact, all along, God had been showing his plan. Luke chapter 8, Jesus teaches about the wise man who built his house upon what? Upon the rock. The foolish builder built on the sand, and the wise one built upon the rock. What is Jesus casting imagery to? That he is the rock. He's the one you build on. Paul in the New Testament speaks of Jesus as the chief cornerstone in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 20. That rock is a picture of Jesus who came to bring a new kingdom. Now, God's kingdom which will never fade away. The rock in the dream is described as being supernatural, humble, and gradually growing into a mountain that fills the earth. It represents the kingdom of God, which, while appearing weak and insignificant, has the power to transform the world. Now, notice the importance of understanding that the kingdom is both present and future offers believers certainty in their faith while they're allowing the flexibility of how to engage their world now. So this text gives us in 2025 a foundation upon which we can build, even when all of society may reject God, when all of society may put other things at the center of the focus, that maybe the whole world is in a sense worshiping other things. As believers of God, we find ourselves building upon that rock. Now, do you realize that far greater than any one kingdom on this planet is a kingdom that will last forever? It's the church. Not the institution of church, but the church as believers. All around the world, there is the church that is a kingdom that is being established, while from a small stone into a mountain, one that covers the earth. Genuine followers as representation of God's kingdom around our world today. Now notice, there are some good principles from Daniel's life that we can embrace in our own faith journey. King Nebuchadnezzar had just ordered the execution of nearly all the wise men, enchanters, and magicians, all of those presumably not following God, but following other gods. But in spite of that, Daniel, knowing that God would help him interpret the dream, could have himself allowed the executions to happen and to get rid of those who don't follow God. But what does Daniel do? Daniel stands up and says, hey, don't let those executions happen. Don't execute those people. And he spared his own life, but he spared the lives of those that were around him, those wise men, those enchanters. Why? Because Daniel pleaded for their lives, because many of them may not have known the God that he served, but he wanted to show love and grace in that foreign city. Daniel, who showed honor to his spectacular leader. He was one who not only spared the lives of people around him, he honored Nebuchadnezzar, who was not a godly leader, but one who followed other gods. But in spite of that, Daniel, living in the world he was living, honored the leader that was there. Daniel was humble, and he fully relied on God in a world that didn't follow God. He had given themselves to serving other gods, but Daniel remained faithful and humble and loving. So what does that mean for us? We're living in a world that's operating in a contrary system, and God is no longer at the center. We must fight the desires to embrace other gods. Our priorities, our kingdoms that may look flashy and powerful are those, it can be super easy for us to say we're not going to serve other gods, but we would never say that we serve a different God. But our energy, our resources, and our affections revealed who we serve. If we were to look honestly today, what would our energy and our resources and our affections say about who we are serving? Second thing we can do is reaffirm our commitment to God with all that we are. Forgive me, God, for moments when I've said I follow Jesus, but everything in my life reflects a different reality. All my kingdoms will crumble. Help me to build my life on you. Those things that we think are secure, those things that make us happy, or those things that we think are going to satisfy will crumble in a moment. It is that relationship with God that makes all the difference. Number 3, remain humble and compassionate in our world. It's too often a temptation to allow pride to well up and look down on others who don't believe like we do, or to have a haughty attitude that says our kingdom will destroy yours, versus lovingly live the kingdom of Jesus, his life through us, and welcome those who are trapped in the emptiness of the world system. We live in the tension of the already, but the not yet. Can I tell you that God's kingdom will last forever? The question is, will we allow God to sit on the throne of our heart and our life? Would we put him wholeheartedly at the center of our focus, our energies, our resources, and our affections? I encourage you today to challenge your heart as you are pondering all of these things. Let the Spirit of God speak to you about things that you need, that kingdoms that need to fall, so that you can follow his kingdom and hold tightly and firmly, just like Daniel did, in a day when everything else was fighting against the kingdom of God. He stood firm. Stand firm, my friends. Live in exile like Daniel lived.
Thank you so much for joining us here at Redefined Church. If you have any questions or want prayer, we encourage you to send us a private message. We would be happy to connect with you and to pray with you to help you in your faith journey. Make sure this week to get a hold of the Redefining Moments. You can find those on our website and on our Facebook page. It's a daily prayer and Bible reading guide designed to help you grow and in your walk with Jesus Christ. Make sure that you check out our website so that you can see everything that's happening and to be part of that here at Redefined Church. May God bless you, and we hope that you have an incredible week.